Hi everyone, this is Harry, and in this tutorial we're going to create the Matrix title effect from the new movie Matrix Resurrections. So let's just get started. Create a new composition, 1920 by 1080 and of 10 seconds duration. Make sure you're working in 32 bits per channel. Create a text. Matrix, okay. And make sure you're working in Times New Roman font because that's what the original thing uses. And also make sure that the paragraph option here is set to center text. This will make sure that when you actually change the text later on, this will ensure that the text remains centered. So now center the text. Okay, in the horizontal axis it was okay, but in the y-axis change the anchor point so that it just gets centered. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Now let's pre-comp this thing and name this logo text. Okay, we created the 2D text. Now let's add a texture to it. For that, you can import an image. Here I'm actually importing a kind of a glass looking image. There you go. Let's just adjust this thing a little bit. Alright, just pre-comp this thing and name this logo texture. Alright, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a set matte effect. And select this layer as the track matte layer. So there you go. Okay. So also, I don't like the color of this thing. Let's just add a little bit color to it. I'm using a color vibrance free plugin from Video Copilot. You can also use the same thing. It's free. I mean, there's no point in not using it. So 0.5. You can also use the curves adjustment layer. Here, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to make it a little bit green. Yeah, that looks okay to me. And add a little bit of blur to it. Let's just blur it so that we are actually outputting only a little bit of color value and nothing else. There you go. Now go ahead and add a bevel alpha effect. So this thing defines the direction of the light, and in the original example I'm actually using a light from the right. So let's just go ahead and do the same thing. Alright. And also change the color to something like a green. So it just helps to give it some kind of that distressed look. Okay, we created a 2D logo. Now let's make it 3D. So for that, duplicate this thing and rename this thing to logo extrusion. Add a CC radial blur effect. And set this thing to fading zoom and amount to kind of a negative value. Now add a curves effect. And go to alpha and increase the alpha all the way up. There you go. Right away it's looking like 3D extrusion. So there will be kind of like an anti-aliasing problem. In order to fix it, you can drag it down, drag it right a bit, maybe up. Yeah, that looks fine. Now this thing right here controls the 3D extrusion depth. So if you set this to -2, it will be very low, and if you set this thing to -5, yeah, that looks okay to me. You can change this thing later on, so don't worry about it. It's okay. We created a 3D text. Now let's just add animation to our text. So dive into this logo text layer and enable pack head to 3D and also enable the rotation parameter. So we're gonna basically do this. So it just starts at a negative, at a Y rotation, and then it slowly gets revealed. So let's just leave a few frames for the fade in effect. that we will use later on. So got minus 50 is a nice value. Listen, I actually did this effect already. For that reason only I'm actually giving this tutorial. So the values which I will be using are the values that work for me. You can actually experiment, there's no problem. So now, yeah, the rotation, so it just does this. For this keyframe, let's make it ease out. So, ease in. So this just slowly gets into its position. Yeah, that looks okay to me. Yeah, that looks fine. Now let's just dive back in, and right away we have a problem. So the thing is, the 3D extrusion is actually not following the 3D character's rotation. That's because what we're essentially doing is we're actually blurring it to a point that which is defined by this thing right here. So it's actually at 96 by 540, that means at the center. So that's the reason why even if the 3D character is rotating, it's just pointing in the center only. And if you move it to the left, there you go, it works. So now we need to find a way to make sure that this value changes with the rotation of the character. For that, you can actually use a good feeding zone. For that, you can take the help of a null layer. So layer q null object, make this 3D. For now, just stay with me. You will understand what I'm doing a little bit later on. Hit Control A, rename this to target null. Link the target null to this parent null. And push it back in the z-axis a little bit. Yeah, that works. And now go ahead and animate this thing. So what we can do is we can actually get the same animation data and paste it, but make sure that you are actually at the initial keyframe position. So yeah, so now what's happening is you can see that there is a null which is actually rotating in 3D axis. So if we can find a way to drive this value based on this null's position value, we will this effect will work for sure then. So for that, what we can do is we're gonna take the help of an expression. So hit Alt click. Alright. So this enables the expression parameter for this CC radial blur center thing. So pick whip and select the target null. So we are actually selecting a target null layer. So let's just create a variable, layer 1, and layer 1 is the target null layer. Now let's get this target null layer's position. For that, we're gonna create another new variable, layer 1 position equals. So we're gonna get this layer and we're gonna use a 2-volt parameter, 2-volt expression. So what this will do is it will actually take this guy's position and convert this into volt space. The reason why is because when we try to drive this value with the position value of the target null, when you expose the position parameter right here, it is actually x and y are set to 0 and 0 because it is actually linked to the parent null and it's actually not rotating, and it's not true rotation, it's just linked to it and the parent is rotating, so relatively it's not moving. For that reason, we need to get this thing's original position, like the true volt position, and then drive this value based on the volt position coordinates. So for that, we can use a 2-volt expression, and inside the 2-volt expression, we just need to define a point which we want to convert into volt space. For that, we can actually use this target nulls at the layer 1's anchor point and close parenthesis. So what this will do is so layer 1 position will have the true volt position data of this thing, but we have a third problem right here. This is a 3D point and we are actually working with a 2D point, so we don't need the z value, we only want the x and the y values. So what we can do is open and close brackets, hit layer 1 positions 0. So this gives x value of that target null, and then layer 1 position 1. And this gives the y value of that target null. And there you go, right away it works. And if you don't understand this expression, just don't worry. This is actually a reusable expression. You can actually copy this thing, and I will be posting it in the description. So you can actually copy this thing and just paste it for any effect. Like if you want to create a 3D extrusion, then this is the way to do it. You just need to create a target null and then parent it to another null and then rotate it. It just depends on whatever you're doing with your 2D layer. And you can actually use the null layer to drive the center value, and you can use this expression. All you got to do is just define that layer 1. So this can be done by using a simple pick whip. So yeah, even if you don't understand it, don't worry. So we got the logo extrusion thing working. So now we created the 3D text. So yeah, go to curves layer. We're actually using the logo extrusion property right here. Hit curves and pull it down a little bit. Yeah, that looks fine. In the original example, also the extrusion looks a little bit too much. Decrease it down to maybe like -3. Yeah, that looks fine. In the original example, we have actually a kind of like a red and yellow lights hitting the text from the sides. But this is actually a 2D layer. In order to mimic it, what you can do is actually create a new solid. Let's just add a fractal noise effect to it. Basic will do. Decrease the complexity. We don't want that to be this complex. And add a colorama effect. Colorama, yeah. And now there you go. We have some strange looking thing right here. It's like kind of like a predator effect. So we can actually, if we increase the brightness, so what this will essentially do is the hotspots, I mean the values with the highest white value will be converted red, and the next to yellow, and the next green, blue, dark blue. Well, kind of like that. Colorama basically converts the 0 to 1 data of the histogram into a color output. So so we are actually trying to get only the red, yellow, and green and get rid of the other things. So increase the contrast a little bit up. Decrease the brightness. Yeah, that looks okay to me. And now, okay, let's just scale it in the horizontal axis a little bit. Yeah, like that. Let's just do one thing. Let's add set matte effect so that you guys can understand what I'm doing right here. So set matte, and before doing anything, let's just pre-comp the logo extrusion effect. So Ctrl+Shift+C. So let's just name it logo extruded. Alright. So now for the black solid, like this colorama effect that we did, we can actually define this logo extruded layer as a track matte. There you go. That looks fine. Now you can understand what I'm doing. So go to the output cycle. It has all these colors, and I want to get rid of this red, pink, and everything. So before doing that, just hit editor mode. So it adds on to it. So add mode works in this way. If anything is black, it just will get rid of it. So let's just change this color to black. There you go. And also change this thing to black. Superb. And I don't want this too. Let's just change this thing to black too. So we have only the red and the green thing going on over here, and yellow. Also change this thing to a little bit of an orange. That looks okay. You can maybe change, okay, increase the brightness a little bit. And make sure you scale it a little bit more. Okay, now go ahead and apply a fast box blur. Blur it And now duplicate the set matte effect. Yeah, move it down. There you go. So we're getting this kind of like a strange look. Don't worry, it will look better in a second. So also I forget to tell you, so here we created 3D text, but there is a problem. The bevel alpha effect which we added to this thing stays the same even if the characters is rotating. So for that you can actually go ahead, you can actually go ahead and do the logo texture and adjust the bevel alpha and also animate the thing. So go ahead to 12 frames. That's where we started the animation of the rotation. Make sure that the edge thickness, yeah, that looks fine, 0.75, and go ahead to 2 minutes 12 seconds. That and set this thing to 2. You can hit U to expose the keyframes and set this thing to ease in. There you go. Now that works too. All right, you can add a new adjustment layer and add a glow effect. This is what defines the entire thing. Glow effect, and increase the threshold a little bit so that only the brighter values become blurry. Maybe decrease intensity to 0.5 and maybe increase the radius a little bit more, 20. I'll do one thing, decrease it to 5. Duplicate the glow effect, decrease the threshold to something like maybe 50 so that everything else gets the glow effect. Decrease the intensity to maybe 0.1 and then increase the radius a little bit more, like a 50. This looks okay. Maybe we can actually decrease this thing opacity a little bit. Maybe go ahead with 100. Add a curves effect. And I add it before the fast box blur and just decrease it down a bit. Yeah, basically we are just doing look development here. So that looks okay to me. Maybe adjust the scale width a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, that's okay. I wouldn't say super, but that was okay. And before doing anything, I actually forgot to tell you, this looks actually plain. Yeah, this looks bland. In order to add a little bit of variation in the lighting, you can actually use a new black solid and use a new fractal noise. Apply fractal noise effect. The basic will work fine. Just set this thing to overlay and add a set matte effect as always, and the track matte logo extruded layer. There you go. Decrease the contrast to 50 so that, there you go. So it just adds a little bit of a texture to this thing. Just looks fine. Now adjust the glow layer. Maybe increase the glow radius to 100. Maybe increase the glow radius here to 10. Or maybe decrease the intensity a little bit more. Yeah, that looks okay to me. Yeah, that looks fine. Maybe decrease this guy a little bit even more. Okay, you can actually duplicate this thing, and let's just do a little bit. Let's just also go ahead with the logo texture and pre-comp this logo texture and define this as set matte logo texture. So we are actually affecting only the top layer. Like if you can see, we are only affecting the top layer right now. And now change the evolution. I'll go ahead and change the random seed of this. So we're gonna end up with something. Yeah, that looks fine. Fast blur, increase the blur a bit. Hit set matte 2 and set matte also slow texture. Blur this thing a little bit even more. Yeah, that looks fine. And maybe I don't want any green for this thing, so convert this thing to red too. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Also add this. Okay, this thing is actually too much. Maybe decrease this down to 70. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay, for the sake of this tutorial, I am stopping the look development here. You can actually go ahead and improve this thing if you want to. Yeah, that looks fine. Now let's just pre-comp everything into a new composition and name this logo. Maybe the glow effect can be isolated. Ctrl X, Ctrl V. Yeah. So now we have this thing. So now what we're trying to do is we will try to add that digital deinterlace kind of particle logo, whatever you want to call it. So that thing can be done by using a card wipe effect. So card wipe and add it to our logo layer. There you go. So set the flip axis to Y and work in half resolution. Now my After Effects is struggling a little bit over here. I don't want any rows, I just want columns. So increase the columns to a number. Let's just concentrate and let's just change this to full resolution for a while. Increase the columns maybe to 750 then. Yeah, okay, that looks okay. Also transition completion, set that to 0. I don't want to transition complete, but transition width to 100% so that whatever we're trying to do affects the entire thing over here. Maybe we can actually go ahead to this logo extruded thing and decrease and add a curves effect to it. Maybe decrease it down a little bit. Yeah, that thing is actually, yeah, down. Now that looks fine. Yeah, okay. We have this animation, and after a few seconds, let's just go out with maybe to 4 seconds and start the card wipe effect. So what we're trying to do is we're gonna, what is this, position jitter. If you change the Y jitter amount, there you go. So just a simple effect, nothing else. You just need to know that it exists in After Effects. That's it. Yeah, it took me a while. So hit 0, hit U to expose the keyframes, and maybe go ahead 2 seconds, and then set this thing to maybe like a 0.5 or something. 0.5 is a little bit too much. 0.4. Go ahead with high resolution. So look at it. Maybe quad resolution. My system's actually struggling a lot. Yeah. And okay, so what happens is it has a speed property, so it actually jitters up, down, up, down, up, down. So we can actually turn this down to 0. Also set the X and Y Z jitters to 0 too. We're not using it, but we're gonna use the Z jitter later on for that. Okay, this is actually working, so don't worry. In the quad resolution it won't work, it won't look that great, but it's actually working, so just stay with me. Alright, so now animate the position property of the logo thing. So hit U, expose the parameters, and go ahead with 6 keyframes and pull it down all the way down. Maybe go ahead with 7 and pull it down. So this is what happens. So there you go. And let's just so 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 this position is actually X and Y positions are tied up. So if you want to change the keyframe interpolation, you can actually separate the dimensions. And you can actually control the Y position as a separate thing. So ease out and then just a linear thing. So what we did was we actually, it stays in for a while and then goes down. Do the same thing for jitter. So just it starts slowly and then picks up speed. Yeah, that looks fine. And also what happens is after a certain value the jitter stops. So for that we can actually go ahead and decrease the jitter value to maybe like 0.2. No one will see it. And here actually set this thing to interpolation. So what it will do is it will jitter out. I mean it will space the things out and then it will pull things down, pull things back. So for example, so it goes like this and then it goes like this. This actually helps to sell the effect of it going down. So there you go. We have this thing doing this and then going down. Yeah, it's working fine. Now from here onward, it's only a Y zeta. We can actually add a Z zeta. So in order to spread this thing a little bit to the sides, maybe 1.5. Set this thing to 1.5 and maybe start it a little bit over here. Set this thing to 0 and also make sure that the interpolation is set to slowly ease out and then a linear thing. That will be fine. And in the original example, when it is reaching down, we will have it like these particles kind of like a waving pattern. And for that, you can actually use a turbulent displace effect and apply it to this thing. There you go. Decrease the size of it a little bit, maybe to 25. Yeah, that looks fine. And so keyframe this thing to set the amount to 50 right over here, and it just starts from over here. So set this thing to 0 and do the same thing. Yeah, the same thing. So it starts, ease out, and then a linear thing. Maybe ease in for this thing because that looks fine. So it's just disperses down and then goes back. You can actually tweak these values in order to make this look a little even more better, but for the sake of this tutorial, as always, I'm just sticking with this thing. So don't worry, with the look of this, we are actually working in quad resolution, and when you go to the full resolution, it's working absolutely fine. So it's just working half resolution for now. So we created this effect. Now I'm getting a feeling like this is a little bit more saturated. Let's go ahead with this thing and go with and add a hue and saturation effect. Maybe don't give space, hue and saturation. Add it somewhere and decrease the saturation a little bit. Maybe it is too much. Increase the saturation just a little bit. Yeah, that looks fine. Yeah, that looks okay. Okay, well, let's save this thing. Yeah, matrix tutorial. Oh my god. Alright, so we have the text and we animated the text. So now create a new camera, 35mm, and I prefer using a single node camera. A two node camera will be useful only when you're orbiting around a particular point. For now, single node camera will do fine. So animate the position of, and before doing that, make sure that the logo is a 3D layer. Alright. So now animate the camera position, pull it back in the Z-axis a bit. Let's just take position, and then at this point of time it needs to move away from the camera. Maybe pull it down so that you can actually see the thing going on over here. At this point of time it needs to go in like that. There you go. So go ahead and to the graph editor, position, separate the dimensions, go ahead with the G property and make sure that select both keyframes, make them linear, and when you're selecting a new point right over here, right over at the time, maybe the 10th frame, you know what value it will be so that you can actually follow a linear path. Delete this keyframe. Now let's check this out. Okay, let's just play it in real time. That looks okay. It's okay. We created the logo animation. So now what we can do is we can actually go ahead and create the time code. Yeah, the matrix trademark effect. For that, you can actually create a new text. Let's just hide these things so that we can actually work a little bit easier. When you click and hold this thing, you will be granted with a vertical type tool. Let's just type A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. Alright, let's move into new comp, move all attributes into the new composition and work in this composition. So hit composition and also center the text before. And for this thing, make sure the paragraph is set to left align text so that it starts at the top. Push it up a bit. And adjust the comp settings. And before adjusting the comp settings, also make sure that the character spacing is a little bit less. And also change the font to, where is it? It's Zilap, oriental. Zilap. Okay. This is just a stylized font. It's basically G, H, I. They're the same letters, but it just makes it look kind of like Chinese. And it works a lot better for these kind of things. So let's go ahead with composition. Adjust the composition property. The height, increase the height a little bit. Maybe do one thing. Height to 920 and width, decrease the width all the way down. And make sure the preview is checked in so that you can see what is going on. Decrease it. Yeah, that looks fine. Transform, reset, and push it up a bit. Go ahead and decrease the font size so that it fits in. Yeah, there you go. That looks fine. Now, we all know that the matrix, this time code actually needs to change, but it is actually static right now. For that, you can actually click expose the character offset animator. So hit the character offset and change this thing to something. So you can actually hit R click and use the time expression, time times 1. So what this will do is, for every second it will actually change it. So every second it changes. That's fine. So we have this comp inside the original composition. So now create a new solid, add a particle effect, particle world. So yeah, you can actually hide this thing. Yeah, this is what's happening. So what we can do is we're going to define the particle shape as this texture. So for that, dive into the particle parameter, hit particle type to a textured square, and define the texture as this ABCDFGHK comp. Increase the size so that you guys can actually see it. Decrease it. Increase the size. There you go. You can see right away that so this is what happens. It's just the particles that are getting generated are actually using this texture. But we want the animation to be like straight down. So for that, increase the producer radius x-axis so that, yeah, do this. Radius y, maybe turn this thing to 0 and z also turn this thing to 0. So, alright. So first, go ahead and position it up a bit. Yeah, make sure you enable the camera. So there you go. So let's change the particle animation thing, and also before that let's change the color to white. Go ahead and change the particle physics. So I don't want it to be an explosive, I want it to in the direction axis. So okay, the direction is wrong. Also decrease gravity, set this thing to 0. So okay, it's moving in the x direction. So go to direction axis and make sure that it is 1, and maybe extra angle to 90. No. 0, 1. I don't know how many times I use this effect, but for some reason I don't understand the direction axis. For example, this is actually positive y-axis, if you ask me. So when we set this to positive y, it should work, but for some reason this thing won't work. Maybe set this thing to 0. Still it won't work. Maybe set this thing to... okay, it's actually getting rotated in that direction. So maybe 0 and axis x, set this thing to x, and maybe set this thing to 90. Yeah, now it's functioning better. Maybe negative 90. So we're going down. Don't know why, but I don't know if this is a bug or something. I don't understand. If you guys know about this, please mention in the comments below. This is supposed to be the y-axis, but when we define y-axis it won't work. But for some reason if we set this to axis and change the angle to negative 90, it works. There you go. And okay, I think the speed is too much. So first thing, increase the longevity to maybe 2, and also decrease the speed of it, velocity, to maybe like 0.5. Push it back in the z-axis, all the way back, maybe something like a 3 or something. Increase the size of this a little bit more, particle size. Just also adjust the x-axis and also position it up. Sorry, not in the axis, position it on the y-axis or top. So what happens is, okay, it's going down, but they are actually cutting off right there. Increase the longevity so that they stay for a lot more time. Okay. Yeah, now that's functioning well. Maybe you can actually decrease the amount to a little bit less. Yeah, that looks fine. But so enable this effect, matrix effect. Set this thing to 100, and if you see it, yeah, that looks fine. So now go ahead and add a simple glow effect, glow, to the particle world. Make sure it's set to a low value, and glow radius is set a little bit more, maybe like 50. Now go ahead and add a VC color vibrance effect to it and set this thing to green. Now this green, this green. Yeah, that looks fine. Also, let's go with full resolution. It's taking time to update. Yeah. Also add a little bit of a directional blur. And maybe set this thing to like 2. Sorry, not the direction. Make the blur amount a little bit more so that it looks natural because it's moving down. Maybe 5. Yeah, 4. 4 works better. Go ahead with quad resolution one more time. Yeah, that looks fine. Let's just duplicate this thing. Also, I forgot to tell you, place this thing at the bottom. Alright, so we have a problem. So Ctrl X and make sure the adjustment layer is right there. There you go. And this thing, move it in front. So let's just push it in front. Sorry, there's no reason. All the way down. Yeah, let's just push it forward. And also, you can see that as it comes closer, the glow effect actually makes it a lot brighter. So what we can do is we can actually fill empty BZ so that everything else turns black, and then use add effect. So yeah, now it's looking fine, but it's still the glow is a little bit too much, so we can decrease the glow with this gamma effect. And also I want this to look green. Yeah, that looks fine. Maybe decrease the brightness just a little bit and increase the luminance 0.5. Also increase the directional blur for this thing to maybe like 10. Yeah, that looks okay. That looks okay. Now go ahead and animate the opacity of this thing. So all the fade in look that I'm talking about before. But do one thing. Instead of animating every single thing, you can actually create a new solid, black solid, and just so let's name this fading. What you can do is at about like 12 frames, maybe 1 second, set this thing to 100 and set this thing to 0. So what happens is, I'm sorry, it's okay. So set this thing to 100 and set this thing to 0. Yeah, now it's working fine. But maybe the logo is actually coming in a little bit too faster. What we can do is we can actually push it back a bit. Let's do one thing. Maybe copy this thing, Control D duplicate, fade into, place it above this thing, and push this forward just a little bit. There you go. Yeah, that looks fine. And there you go. We have this nice looking matrix logo effect. And the cool thing about this effect is if you go into this logo text layer and change this thing to like something like 0fx or anything, just update and it works just fine. So yeah, you can call it as a template too, so you can use it for any logo or any text you want to. And in the original example, we have something going on in the background, kind of like god rays or aurora, whatever you want to call it. And if you want to create that, just create new solid. Let's just move into new composition and work right there. Go ahead and set the composition settings and make it twice the size of width, and also height also same thing. Alright, we're working in double the composition size, and layer, go with layer solid settings and make it comp size. Now add a fractal noise effect. Okay, increase the contrast all the way up, decrease the brightness all the way down, increase all the way up, decrease it down. Yeah, you want to do something like that. And now go ahead and add a CC radial fast blur effect and set this into brightest. Increase the amount and we will get something like this. You can actually increase this contrast, so increase the value. So in the original example, all these god rays are actually pointing up, and so this radial blur actually blurs everything radially, I mean from this center point. So even if you put it right here all the way back, it just won't work. No matter how far you push it back, it still affects everything radially. So what we can do is, for this thing, we're going to use a new adjustment layer and add a polar coordinates effect. So polar coordinates, what it will do is, this is actually distortion effect, and this will actually twist it like this. There you go, 100. Now let's pre-comp these both. and rotate this thing 180 degrees. Go back to the comp and you end up with this. And make it a 3D layer. Place it all the way to the down bottom. And make sure you push it all the way to the back. So 2 views. This is right here and push it all the way to the back. Increase the scale. Also you can actually sorry, this is actual rotation. So you can actually go ahead and set the position of the white to top 2. Yeah, that looks fine. Scale all the way down. And push it back even back. Push it even back further. There you go. Okay. Okay, we have too many of them. So in order to fix this, we can go ahead and decrease the brightness and decrease the number of things right there. Okay, now this looks fine. So go ahead and add a new solid, like a pure white solid, and add this thing. Add a mask effect to it. Let's just blur it a little bit, feather it out, and now use this guy as a lumomet. I mean, transform mode. Change the transform mode to lumomet. Sorry, alpha matte, and you're gonna end up with something like this. There you go. And if you go ahead and hit animate the evolution like time times 100, what will happen is, yeah, you can actually create all these variations, and yeah, the same thing happens here. And you can actually use the color vibrance effect as always. We see color vibrance and this, set this thing to green a little bit. You can actually do, that's it. You can actually duplicate it and maybe duplicate this thing and change this thing to a blue color. We can change the position in order to get that quick effect and hit a screen. So we have both those things working parallelly. There you go. And for the final effect, just decrease this opacity all the way down to 50 or maybe even less 25. So that's it for now, and thank you for watching. And this is Harry from 0FX signing off.